All right, I've been reacting to videos all day, um, trying to catch up on the content, and I was curious on this. Shout out Wick, my boy, Wick, and I'm gonna react to Destiny debate. People, I'll do it.
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm in a Discord.
Oh,
Is there a
I
way in
have
Discord?
no idea. I have no idea.
Oh,
Okay.
left more or right
Yeah,
more
on my
side?
physical.
Do we want to introduce anybody or?
Yeah, this is Marte. Marte, tell people who you are, I guess.
I'm Marte Reyes. I'm an extension of somewhat of the Crucible, and also I'm a IFBB professional bodybuilder, a blood sport debater, and I love talking politics and social issues and relationship dynamics. And you can find me on X as Mighty Marte, and also Instagram as the Real Mighty Mouse, and also YouTube on the Edge. You can find my channel and tune in later. So
Okay,
that's my intro.
go ahead.
He has like all the traits of like that red pill bullshit side of the internet.
Okay. All right. I gotcha. I'm here. Okay. Wait, and then are these supposed to be 30 minutes each? Is that how you're running this? Or?
Yep, 20 to 30 minutes each. Go ahead.
Okay. I think Donald Trump had a clear plan to overthrow the U.S. election. I think they had a clear structure in place to do it. He was basically faking electorate votes across the 7 states needed. He had a plan to pressure the vice president of the United States to accept the fake electorate votes. And then the goal was to use violence in January 6th in order to pressure lawmakers to accept the fake votes. Obviously, it ended up failing, but I would say that everything points pretty clearly to it being an insurrection. But like the plan is all like pretty open out there and everything else. Yeah.
Okay, go ahead, Marte. Why is that wrong?
So the reason why it's wrong is because we're not here to argue that Trump headed an insurrection, meaning like the electors. We're not here to argue the electors at all. So the elector scheme is irrelevant completely. If Trump tried to seat them down, there was no riot. If there would be no riot, there'd be no quote unquote insurrection. So, I mean, so here's the thing though, Destiny's going to try to bog me down with this elector scheme, which is irrelevant and doesn't make sense. It's nonsensical. So going on to my point, I'm not trying to gish gallop here, but his statements are not a direct call to violence. As we've seen, the event was a disorganized protest at best, rather than a coordinated.
Oh my god! I don't get how you can just like have the energy to debate these people consistently. I would not have the energy to debate these people consistently. I'll be honest, like arguing the same stuff and. It's just like,
coup. Where's the coordination at? I didn't see a direct call for a riot or violence by Trump. Where was that at, Destiny?
So you say disorganized protests, but didn't they all go to the Capitol building and then try to break into the Capitol building to circumvent the certification of the election? And didn't they succeed in that? Or did that all just happen accidentally?
So here's the thing, Trump, and I quote, I demand that Congress do the right thing and only count the electors, which, by the way,
so
is
he just
not even really
completely bypassed what Destiny just said. I'll be honest, this shit's about to suck. This shit's about to suck. I might skip this entire thing. I'll give him.
analogous to this whole point, who have been lawfully slated. I know that everyone here will be marching over to the Capitol building to peacefully and patriotically protest. Where's the call for violence there?
So that's actually the perfect encapsulation of the entire election. When he says Congress should only seat the lawfully slated electors, he's talking about his fake ones. And when he says everybody's going to march over to the Capitol to make your voice heard, he's sending his people, not in a disorganized manner, but in a very organized manner, over to the Capitol building to pressure Congress to accept his fake electors.
So once again, the elector scheme isn't relevant to the insurrection, by the way. So when we're talking about the insurrection, you're failing to bring up any
point. This guy just has no idea what context is. Okay, strike two. One more strike, and he's fucking out of here, boy. He's fucking out of here, mate.
As far as the motivation, where's the motivation?
To what? For what?
For this so-called insurrection that you're seeing.
Motivation is to stay in office for 4 more years.
Well, no, the motivation for anybody is to stay in office. That's if they're running for Congress, governor, or anything like that. Everybody's motivated to do this. I'm talking about the insurrection. Where's the motivation for the specific insurrection?
The motivation is to pressure Congress to accept his fake electors so that he remains in office.
Right. I can go ahead and pressure anybody to do anything, but we're talking about commanding people to do an insurrection on behalf of...
So here's the question. So help me with this, okay? So do you agree that everybody was there on January 6th because Trump called them to be there?
Well, as far as this, yes, a peaceful protest.
So he called them to be there. Do you agree that everybody went to the Capitol building afterwards because Trump said that they would all be marching to the Capitol?
He said to peacefully protest. Yes. Once again,
do you agree that they all went to the Capitol building because Trump told them to go to the Capitol?
Not fitting the guidelines for any insurrection. We're talking about a peaceful protest.
I'm just asking a simple question. Did Trump tell them all to go to the Capitol building?
He said to march over to the Capitol building. Yes, he
Okay,
specifically
so
stated
he
that.
called all of them there on January 6th. They all marched to the Capitol building. Okay, they broke through the barricades and they started to break into the Capitol building to delay the certification of the vote. Did Trump make any effort until Ashley Babbitt got shot and killed? Did Trump make any effort to intervene when he was notified that the Capitol was being overrun?
Let's back up. You're talking about making an effort. Well, let's get past this first point. When did he state to break past the barriers or do any of this other stuff?
I never said that. I'm asking, did he make any effort to intervene once the barriers were broken?
So there's a timeline here. So he did text right after this, matter of fact, to go home in peace as soon as he could, urging rioters to go home in peace. So critics vaguely argue this was too late and included a sympathetic language like "we love you," things like this. But once again, this wasn't direction. This wasn't direction. You're saying
No one is talking about direction. I'm just asking, was it not the case that the Capitol was broken into and for hours there was a riot there before Trump told people to go home?
Destiny, my first point was intention and motivation. Can we get past this first?
No, you can't even answer my simple question, so I don't know if there's any point in this. So far you agree that everybody was there because Trump called them to be there on January 6th. They marched to the Capitol building because, what?
I had a simple question. Where's the intention and motivation? We're getting past this. Now you want me to ask your questions without even...
I don't know what you mean, the intention and motivation. The intention was to circumvent the lawful electoral vote slating process. That was what they wanted to do, and he did it. He managed to circumvent it for it sometime.
Entailment of proving this. Can you show me in any way where this was tied to a disruption? Meaning, like, if you're talking about this specifically, can you point to where he instructed people to commit any treasonous insurrection activity?
Time. He believes that you have to say... Donald Trump has to say very specifically on like him doing this, and that's just a stupid thing to claim.
Oh, you got a camera for us there.
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay, tell people who you are, what you do, all that.
Yeah, I'm Deej. I orbit Destiny I orbit Wix sometimes, and right now I post on Twitter.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Black
for
and
being
white
here.
is so
really
cringe.
appreciate you. So today the topic is SARS-CoV-2 almost certainly came from a zoonotic spillover. There is no reason to think it was leaked from a lab. Destiny, give your opening thoughts, and then we'll get into it. Same rules, same thing. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's basically my opening. I mean, the pattern of infections all spreads from the wet market. We have good epidemiological and genetic evidence to see that it originated from the wet market. There's literally zero evidence whatsoever that it even came from the lab at all. I don't even know how, short of like some insanely secretive plot that nobody knows about, there's literally no explanation for how it could have originated from a lab in Wuhan.
Yeah, go ahead, Deej. Take it away.
So your stance really is that you think that there is no evidence to suggest that it could have stemmed from the lab.
To suggest there might be a couple things that cut in favor, but generally speaking, no, all the evidence points towards zoonotic spillover.
And how hot, like when we're looking at the standard of evidence that we have pointing towards it being a zoonotic spillover, how highly do you rate the level of evidence that we have to confirm that that is the
Well, confirm, I don't think we'll ever know, but I'd like say 90 to 95%. Basically, it's 100% unless there is there would have to be a whole planned, contrived plot from Chinese operatives to take that virus and then leak it to the wet market on their own without anybody knowing about it, and there's no evidence of it.
So, sorry, I just want to make sure that I understood what you said. So basically, you think that the only way that it could have come from the lab is if China intentionally leaked it from the lab?
Well, took it to the wet market and leaked it, but even that theory would have a lot of problems that would be difficult to contend with.
Okay, and how, I guess, because I'm not going to get into some of the facts if we agree on these.
Sure.
The virus, do you know how the spillover occurred in the wet market?
I think the theory is that there were two separate spillover events, most likely from the raccoon dog stalls in the southwest portion, I think, of the Wuhan wet market, the Wuhan seafood market.
And why is that the most likely theory?
When you take samples from the area, all of the epidemiological evidence seems to center around stalls that are located in that part of the market. They're the most that test positive for samples that are confirming the SARS-CoV-2 genome, because all of the cases, the very first ones, of the first 5, I think 3 or 4 had direct links to the wet market. The first person I think they theorized was sick was a wet market worker, and then all of the cases spread out about as you would expect epidemiologically from the wet market.
So, are you suggesting that we know the intermediary host for the virus?
No, I don't think we do, but I don't think we need to. We don't know the intermediary host, for instance, for SARS-CoV-1 as well.
That's not true. We know what it is.
We don't know the spillover event for SARS-CoV-1. We absolutely don't.
We found that out within 6 months.
We don't.
The intermediate host for SARS-CoV-2 was civet minks.
We don't know that either.
No, we do.
And can you provide?
You can source me after, I guess.
Yeah. Let me go ahead and Do we want to do sourcing on this call?
I mean, I'd be curious because I've never seen
go
that,
for it.
and I've read a
Send
lot of
them-
papers on
Fruit
this at this point,
fly
so that's pretty
wants the
crazy.
box,
When you say
bro.
that is the intermediary host, you mean that the spillover event was found, or you mean that this is a host that can facilitate the virus and transfer it to humans?
Yeah, so like if you just do a search for SARS-CoV-2 intermediary host, it's going to say any intermediary host is not found. If you do a SARS-1 search for the same terms, you'll find that we do know what the intermediary host for SARS-CoV-1 was.
Can you explain
Oh,
it?
okay.
And that was
Sorry, hold
discovered
on.
within 6 months.
Can you explain it for the
Wait,
audience?
my bad. Hold on. Yeah, sorry. Okay, I think you're correct there. I spoke too quickly. What I said is we don't have the spillover event for SARS-CoV-1. We might have, in retrospect, found the intermediary host. But we don't have the exact spillover event for when it occurred.
Correct. And but the intermediary host is, I would say, not trivial because that is the explanation of how it jumped from the animals into humans. Right now, the only evidence that we have, like going to what you said about them thinking raccoons being a potential vector, is the raccoons were present with the same virus that the humans had, but that was a dead culture of the virus and could have actually just been spread from human to the raccoons.
So it could have been that was initially theorized, but when people go back and they do the tests on these things to figure out where they came from, like in animal stalls where there was the highest concentration of the virus found, it was where there were like these raccoon dogs. It was in the southwest parts of these stalls. In other animal samples where there were no humans present, they found very little or no SARS-CoV-2. And in other stalls where there was more human DNA present, they found more SARS-CoV-2. So the idea that the SARS-CoV-2 was coming from someplace beyond those raccoon dogs, I just haven't seen that. There's no theory or evidence of how it could have come from any other place, and it all seems to point to the raccoon dogs.
Would you say that we have, because one of the main criticisms
Also,
of,
wait, I'm sorry, can I ask one more question? I'm sorry, this is actually, you're telling me that for SARS-CoV-1, we found a 100% genetic match for nucleotide sequence DNA, or for RNA. We found a 100% sequence match for SARS-CoV-1 in an animal, and also for for the same virus that infected humans for SARS-CoV-1?
So it's been a little bit since I looked at it, so I don't remember exactly how they determine. What I do know is the confirmed jump from what animals initially had bred the disease in them that made it possible to pass from humans was confirmed to have been that species for SARS-CoV-1.
Okay. I would try, I'd be curious to find it because my understanding, my research, the two closest strands to SARS-CoV-2 were Banal52 and RTG13. These had a 96.8 and a 96.1% match respectively. I thought that the closest nucleotide sequence match, like percentage similarity for SARS-CoV-1.
I'm not giving a lot of commentary. I'm just wasting my time. I'm just stealing Wix's content. Oh my God, I'm a fucking piece of shit. I don't really have a lot to say when it comes down to the COVID stuff, especially since we're kind of done. I don't think, like, proving that it's not a conspiracy is kind of just a waste of time at this point. Because like all the people don't care about facts that push the conspiracy. At least being informed to a basic level, it probably would be wise. So I can go like, you can't prove that, but to have any definitive statement saying one way or the other is at this point kind of like a waste of time. Because none of these people either understand or care about the facts.
Was like 95%. But we can agree to disagree, I guess, on that fact if you want. I don't know if it's necessarily consequential, but I was not aware that there was the crossover species and the exact SARS-CoV-1 virus had been identified in an animal species. But I'll look for it later, I guess. But
yeah. So and I mean, I don't have like I'll be honest, I didn't like do new research for this. I'm going based off of like back when I was researching in 2023 roughly. So like if we want to get down to the scientific names of things, I'm not going to be that strong in that because it's whatever.
I'm curious then, because I understand that it's possible to try to nibble around the edges for the zoonotic spillover. Can you give me any conceivable theory where it would have gotten from the lab to the wet market, where no lab worker was ever shown to be infected and no spread of the virus ever happened from around the lab? And why did it start spreading from the wet market? Can you give me a story?
So I don't agree with the facts on that. We know that number one, the lab was kind of under hot water and not investigation, but criticism for poor like procedures around leaking the like containment. And also there were multiple staff workers who did get sick with symptoms that all we have is that they were sick because China pretty much deleted all the records about what their specific symptoms were. And those individuals did have a like connection to the wet market. Like they did go there. To answer your question,
real quick thing, because we have a factual disagreement here. So my understanding is the serum was available to test for these people for seropositivity for SARS-CoV-2. They were tested later on, those samples. None of them tested positive for it. And we do know the symptoms for a lot of those sick workers. That I think one guy had like a broken arm. A couple had like some symptoms that were pneumonia-like, and then one guy had like a cold or flu. But like they tested all of these later on. None of these people had COVID. And if you would believe that they had COVID, it would have been like 2 months before the outbreak. So how can you account for like the cryptic transmission where just a couple people were infected, but it didn't have an outbreak anywhere besides the wet market, which is where it eventually outbreak from? Yeah.
So when were those tests on the subjects done, and who was performing them?
The seropositivity test would I want to say they were done sometime in 2020. But when a lab worker gets sick, you take a blood sample, then you keep it on a storage so you can test it later if you need to or whatever. But none of those people nobody's ever tested positive from any of the lab workers for COVID.
Well, I mean, a lot of people tested negative for COVID that did still have COVID as well. Like
well, there might have been people who were asymptomatic who didn't go to the hospital, maybe. But for people,
that's totally plausible as well. They were asymptomatic, went to the wet market, and then spread the disease. And then,
sure, but what I'm trying to account for is how is it that they got sick at the lab, didn't spread it anywhere else, then got all the way to the wet market, spread it at the wet market, went home, didn't spread it anywhere else, and then it started to all spread from the wet market? How is that possible?
Well, there's a pretty simple reason, which is like you're more likely to spread the disease when you're touching and handling things that people are eating. So obviously, if they frequent the wet market, they have the disease, right? Similar to like hold on.
Let Deej go. Go ahead, Deej.
Yeah, because if we're going to say that, well, one person, getting the disease in the hospital, traveling a couple of miles to the wet market and introducing it to the wet market is not likely. How is it likely that the disease would have traveled thousands of miles from the initial reservoir along a whole animal trade in a whole bunch of different cities before getting to Wuhan without any of those places first exhibiting COVID-like symptoms?
Yeah, so that explanation is actually super simple. And the reason is because that animal trade is still illegal and it's done via smuggling in China. So the conditions are pretty dirty, but people try to keep it secret. These are literally things that are being smuggled from the South China Cave area where you're trying not to get caught by officials, and then animals are moving from cage to cage. There might have been workers along that trade route that maybe did get asymptomatic infections, possibly, but it's far more believable to think that somebody that's working in animal smuggling might be either a little more careful or a little more isolated because they know that they're dealing with bad shit, they don't get caught by authorities, versus a guy at a lab got sick and then traveled 12 kilometers to a wet market, only spread it there, went back to his home wherever he lived, and never was a super spreader from any other location. They just super spread at the wet market, where it's not like they're going there and touching everybody else's food and giving it to other people.
Well, but I mean, you could argue all of the cases were linked back to the wet market, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the only place that the spread occurred was at the wet market. It just means that the original source went there. So if let's say one of the researchers, right, they come home, they kiss their wife, they spread it to their wife, and then the researcher then goes to the market, or the researcher's wife then goes to the market, it's very likely, in fact highly probable, that the wet market would still be seen as the initial threat vector because it is a circumstance where the disease can propagate more easily and faster.
Why would the disease propagate more easily in a wet market than on a train to the wet market or in any of the number of intermediary stops? Also, I don't even think there's any evidence that links any of the people at the lab to the wet market. But let's assume they did go. Let's assume they went right from the lab right to the wet market. How do they take a 12.1 kilometer journey, however many train stops, train rides, train stations, internal, and don't spread it to a single person? And then at the wet market, they spread it to a ton of people. And then they take the train all the way back. Don't spread it to anybody. Go home. Go back to the lab. How?
Well, they're researchers. Maybe they had a car.
So I guess there's an interesting aspect about that is that the assumption is that it originated into a lab, and the claim being made here is that they had to travel to this specific location. They're using the term wet market, but in the midst of the travel, nobody else got COVID. So in that span of time, nobody else got COVID with these interactions, only people in the wet market.
Right?
So
you ask, we can quibble over all the potential ways that this could occur, but your stance was there was no way that it could have spread from the
because first of all, I don't think because one, we're already on a hypothetical where there's no seropositivity for any of them involved. There's this day there's zero evidence that anybody at that lab was infected. Not only is there zero evidence, there's literally pictures of them going out to dinner 3 or 4 or 5 days after the first infection starts showing up at the wet market. So they're sick, they're spreading it to some people at the wet market, but nobody else. They have a car that they drive right to the wet market. There's no evidence of that, by the way, whatsoever, that any of them were traveling to the wet market. They didn't take any public transport anywhere, even though it's extremely common in China. They didn't spread it to any of their friends. It's so impossible to believe all of those coincidences in a row rather than the wet market.
I would agree with you if China was being transparent, but what was China's initial first response to the disease, and then what was their response even after the initial outbreak and it had spread? And also, I would like to see how you would compare their response to SARS-CoV-2 versus how they responded to SARS-CoV-1.
Well, their first response was to deny it, and now their current response is to say that it came from the United States.
That is one. So they did put out a white paper, and they said that it potentially could have come from the United States, but to pay attention to what the international community and scientists say.
Yep, and all the international community and scientists, all the research, the scientific research is all focused more and more and more on the wet market. All of the evidence is continuing to point in that direction.
Actually, yes, you're 100% right. They all do focus on it. And what did those
not focused as in biased that way. I mean, all of it's pointing in that direction. There is not a single piece of scientific evidence that's pointing in a different direction.
So I heavily disagree with you there because initially, even during the time when China did allow WHO researchers in to look at their curated evidence, it was considered racist and a conspiracy theory among the scientific community to promote the lab leak theory. So kind of this idea when the evidence was hot that they were looking equally into all potential like sources of where it could have come just isn't really true. It was heavily politically biased from the beginning against even considering the lab leak.
Incorrect. That's a very American Western perspective. It was against considering China as a source. Because if we want to say that China intervened, I agree with you. That's why we have no live animal samples. Because one of the things that China did is they went to that wet market, they slaughtered and removed every single live animal. The only epidemiological evidence we can point to is the remains and stuff that exist in the sewage drains outside of the stalls. All those animals were slaughtered before they let people into test. And they even removed the characters on the boards that said live animal sales when there were people taking pictures there.
Yep. So that makes kind of the claim that there's like the claim that we definitely know like that the disease transferred from, say, the raccoon dogs to humans isn't actually that strong, because the evidence that would allow the scientific community to make a strong claim for that has been deleted. And that's part of the problem.
It hasn't been deleted. They couldn't know because there's still a ton of evidence in the drains. You could link it back.
Yes, a lot of dead animals that could have literally just had the virus in their DNA in the same way that if I had COVID and got in a car accident, I'd still test positive for COVID.
Yeah, but all of the cases spread from and originate from, and the density all spreads out from the wet market.
Yeah, sure, but that's a lot of it is natural due to the conditions in the wet market, making it a playground for the diseases to spread. That's part of the reason why we criticize wet markets in general.
No, that's not a reason why. The reason why is because they're bringing in animals that are infected with diseases that can likely spill over to humans. There was a researcher that went in 2014 that literally took a picture of the exact stall.
So it seems like the biggest thing is trying to determine where the origination of COVID is, and there's no evidence that it originated in the lab. Most of the evidence claims that it originated in these wet markets. The problem is, of course, is that these wet markets are very far away from the lab, and you have to make the conclusion on how these scientists got to the wet market and infested them in a logical way, and there doesn't seem to be one. So, okay.
The exact stall that the raccoon dogs were kept in, and said this might be a really bad deal in the future, which is when that's literally the exact same stall where SARS-CoV-2 came from.
Sure, but here's the thing, right? That
can
all be true.
Just on that claim, you keep saying that the wet market is an ideal place to spread it from. No, it's not. Wet market was a giant open air, basically, or if it wasn't open air, the ceilings and tents were really, really tall. It probably would spread better in hospitals, which it did. Probably spread better in supermarkets, which it did. Better in malls, in any high density area. I don't know why we would assume the wet markets are the best place for it to start spreading.
Well, I mean, okay, if we're going by U.S. standards of how we handle food, I'd agree. But again, to your point, right? COVID can transmit from a human to an animal and then back into a human. We know that's part of the research that we have done. We know that it can do that, and it did do that, right? People contracting it from their pets or from somebody else's pet. So it's kind of, I don't necessarily want to get bogged down on whether the wet market is an ideal condition or not. COVID could very easily spread in that environment and situation, which is why. Whether it was introduced by a bat or whether it was introduced by a human who spread it to an animal, it would spread similarly within those conditions.
I don't disagree with that, but that's why I said we would have to have a theory that can account for somebody getting the virus at the lab, taking it over to the wet market, not being infected themselves, and not infecting a single other person in any other area. And we would also have to account for a whole bunch of... I agree. That's why I didn't say 100%, but that's an extraordinary claim. And not only is it extraordinary because we would have to have a whole plot to do that, which would be hard to explain why would you do that, but we would need a whole plot for that to happen. We would also have to explain how did they create a brand new virus using a unique viral backbone, using amino acids that weren't predicted by any known computer model on a virus that all of the research for this had been posted and was being published for so long. How did they do all of this under wraps for so long? There's so many weird scientific things you have to account for. It seems way easier to just believe it was probably a zoonotic spillover event, especially given how close the ancestors we found in other South China caves were to the SARS-CoV-2 original leak.
So wait, are you suggesting that it would be more difficult for a black budget research team to force engineer a virus to adopt certain traits when we have a virus that's similar to a virus, then that's less plausible than it naturally evolved from a virus into what was SARS-CoV-2?
Yes. Using a novel backbone that wasn't published or documented by any other researcher? Correct. And then having the amino acids that bind in the cells that weren't predicted by computer models that made it pretty adaptive to humans and allowed it to spread so fast. Yeah, I think that the evidence for it being some black market research thing, there's basically no evidence to support that theory at all. You would have to make a whole bunch of very crazy assumptions.
I mean, if you ask people in the, during towards the end of World War II if the U.S. was developing nuclear weapons. There wouldn't be any evidence to suggest that other than tin pot conspiracy brain stuff, right?
That's true, but I don't even know how many people knew anything about atomic physics at that point in time. Now we have cell phones, we have labs that are there to study things specifically. We've got tons of epidemiological data. Like there's tons of reasons why people know things now that aren't necessarily comparable to the Manhattan Project.
So you think that like all the secret research that the U.S. or China does is known to the public, and if we don't have evidence of it, we can't assume that they're doing these things?
No, not all research, but it depends on the type of research you're doing. Like if you were to tell me that the United States does secret research on like propulsion missile systems that nobody else knows about, that's possible and probably likely. It's something that only the US government can probably fund or do. There's not a high consumer interest in doing it. Like that makes sense. But if you tell me like the United States government has figured out like a novel way to put together microprocessors in a way that no one else figured out, I would say it's impossible, no shot. There's way too much commercial interest and international interest in this thing in order for some government with a whatever fuck off budget in order to figure that out. It would never happen. So with this particular research, like this is research the whole world is doing. People are publishing papers on it all the time. The idea that there's some black market budget to figure out this stuff, and then also the lab conditions for that black market are so bad, and it's in a publicly like known about lab, and then they also leak the virus and nobody, like it's just so many things to believe there. Again, on a novel viral backbone.
We're talking about China, right? This type of thing isn't really like unique to China when it comes to like secret project leaks and also poor like containment procedures and people following procedures. Like for instance, if I were a Chinese, really anybody in any position, it's historically documented that they inflate and deflate numbers when it is compelling for them, right? And also, like, there's a reason we offshored this research to China. But obviously, like,
well, we didn't offshore.
Weren't researching this.
We do research it here as well. But part of the reason why it's in China is because they have a lot of the epidemiological stuff. The origins for a lot of these viruses are from bat populations, like huge bat populations.
So I guess one additional angle I want to tackle is
we got 5 minutes. By the way, go ahead.
Okay, why do you think China's response to SARS-CoV-2 has been so drastically different from how it was for SARS-CoV-1?
I don't know exactly what the response was for SARS-CoV-1. For SARS-CoV-2, I mean, like, not to be racist, but like eating fucking cats and dogs and having like wet markets and shit for China is a pretty humiliating and embarrassing thing. Like, that's not a proud part.
More of a reactionary response, considering how the United States has been acting towards China. I think something that's very interesting is I understand the idea. This is kind of goes into my theory that the addition of the internet provided people the ability to look up information, but most people don't understand or contextualize information. And with the unknown, they create these conspiracies. I understand the worry of when it comes down to, especially an entity that we deem like our adversary in terms of China. I 100% understand that. Obviously, I'm more pro-American than I'm not pro-China at all. But I do find it crazy how non-verifiable points can be used to confirm a theory. Like, nobody confirmed any of the evidence that is perpetuated. It was just said timeless. It was said multiple times to the point where people think, oh, now we know that it exists, even though there's no evidence to prove it. It's just, it's an interesting situation. Not gonna lie. Debate. I wish I cared about
COVID
stuff more.
That was true during the early 2000s as well.
Sure. I don't know about SARS. I don't know the specific steps that China took related to SARS-CoV-1.
Okay, so I'll just explain it then. So China and SARS-CoV-1, basically they did suppress like the initial wave, try to suppress that the disease existed and that it's just a flu, whatever. But then after a couple of weeks or a couple of months, they were extremely transparent, giving the WHO literally everything that they needed, live samples, etc., to be able to identify the origin of the virus, which is part of the reason why we were able to identify an intermediate host within 6 months. What's interesting, too, is that it actually took longer to find the reservoir of the virus for SARS-CoV-1 than it did for SARS-CoV-2, despite the fact that China was more transparent. I
would have to. So I don't know how important the fact that we did not find the original crossover for SARS-CoV-1, and we didn't find the original SARS-CoV-1 in any animal population. I would be curious to see where that goes, because my understanding is that's just never the case. I'm looking at this now. I don't think that we ever found that original crossover. I think the closest we got was like less than 94%, maybe. In terms of like when they were looking for it a long time ago, but
I would venture that bolsters the point I was going to make, which is why is it that we were able to find the reservoir for SARS-CoV-2 so fast? Relative to the fact we haven't found SARS-CoV-1.
We didn't find the reservoir for SARS-CoV-2 either. The closest
that's the whole zoonotic spread hinges on the idea that it came from one of these two reservoirs of bats.
Yeah, but you don't necessarily always find the original animal. Like
well, no, not the original. So with SARS-CoV-2, right? We very quickly found out the original species and like virus where it kind of incubated, and then from there spread into another animal where it transformed into something that could be spread to humans. With SARS-CoV-1, we very quickly found the animal that spread it to humans. But to your point, we still haven't found the animal that animal contracted it from. And so,
sure, but I guess like SARS-CoV-1 didn't that have like 6 or 7 different spillover events before it turned into a pandemic? Like, I just don't know what the comparison is or why.
well, it was more local. It was more locally contained. It wasn't nearly as infectious, but it was a lot more lethal, which is part of the reason why there was the scare
for SARS-CoV-1. Like, we're not saying that was like a lab leak, are we?
No, we're not saying that. But that's kind of my point. Is if China, like, if we're going to go based off past precedent of what China treating a pandemic level event kind of looks like. Their response to SARS-CoV-2 and SARS-CoV-1 are very different. And when you couple that with intelligence agencies, which I think probably have more intel on what China is or was not studying, both Germany and the US, and I believe Australia, find it most plausible that it did come from a lab, suggests to me that there's information that we don't know because China destroyed it, that intelligence agencies are aware of, and that SARS-CoV-2 most likely did come from a lab. Now, it could have come naturally as well.
Sure. To be fair, real quick on those intelligence reports, those are low confidence. They admit, number one, and number two, they also introduce some evidence that we know now is just not true. Like the idea that researchers were sick, like in the fall or whatever. It's epidemiologically impossible to assume that virus was infecting people 3 months before an outbreak. We know how SARS-CoV-2 spreads. We've seen it spread in almost every single human population across the globe. At no point is there a cryptic transmission for 3 months and then it explodes randomly in a wet market. But real quick, because you're going to get the final word, I think, on things.
Yeah, we'll wrap it up.
So I'm just like, the argument for zoonotic spillover is that we've already found 97% similarity viruses that are circulating in bat populations in the same caves that we know the wet market stalls were selling animals from. That Huanan seafood market literally had more wet market live animal sales than any other wet market in the entire country. The idea that people went there was an animal that was infected, zoonotic spillover happens there, is easily accounted for in every single piece of evidence. Every single scientific investigation has pointed in that direction. Even though China tried to cover it up in the wet market, they got rid of the figures on the signs. They tried to kill all the animals without people going to test. All of the epidemiological data from the samples tested on the site, all of the epidemiological data from people who got sick and went to the hospital afterwards, all of it points to it originating from the wet market. No researcher was ever shown to be sick with COVID. None of the seropositivity ever occurred in any of those people for COVID. We've seen it spread in the same way across the entire rest of the world. And we've seen the when you break down like the actual analysis of the virus itself, like it's a novel backbone. It's never seen anywhere else in the world to account for them creating a novel backbone for a virus and then creating an infectious part of it.
I definitely get what Destiny's points are. It's just there's just so much lack of proof and then a lack of like logical correlation to the points that are being made. The point that this guy made was that there's a difference in terms of response, a more willingness to be more transparent versus one scenario versus the other, and then assuming because there was a more nefarious or more problematic reason, which is why they weren't as transparent for the other version. But again, this both at the end of the day, the point is he lacks correlated evidence. It's just assumptions based off lack of evidence, and that's not good enough. That's not good enough. All right, pretty good. All right, let's go to this one.
Tell people who you are, what you do, where they can find you, and tell people, and then we'll get the show on the road.
Thank you very much for having me, Wick. My name is Claudio. I'm streaming from Portugal. My stripper name is Ferry, and because I'm getting older, I'm trying to get some YouTube coins, so I'm making the transition. So you can find me on the Untouchable Empire, more specifically on the Team Ferry show. Shout out to the Untouchables, and thank you. Nice to meet you, Destiny.
Yeah, nice to meet you too.
Okay, Destiny, give us your opening thoughts and we'll get into it.
Yeah, sorry, this is just like the other ones, I guess. There's just literally zero evidence whatsoever that Epstein was killed by any other person. The two most common conspiracies are that either somebody else was let in to kill him or he was allowed to kill himself.
I don't care about this. I'm not gonna lie. I think there's. I just don't care. Or what's this one about?
Perfect. Tell people who you are. Introduce yourself. Where can they find you?
So I'm Mr. Wise Guy, and I'm going to be very awkward because I do not do good with talking to public spaces. But anyways, you can find me on YouTube, Rumble, X, all Mr. Wise Guy.
Okay. To the topic, Destiny, do you want to start us off? Go ahead.
Yeah, I would say that there are several things you could point to, but I'll just focus on Roger Stone. I think Roger Stone obviously was a campaign surrogate, was in communication with the Trump camp. I think that it's well known at this point that Roger Stone was communicating with the Russian hacker that hacked the DNC and was trying to coordinate the media leaks from the DNC hacks with the Guccifer 2.0 hacker who was working for the Russian KGB. And then the Yeah, that's yeah. Oh, I mean, Roger Stone was they tried to charge him and investigate this, and he didn't cooperate at all. He obstructed over and over again. He told another witness not to cooperate, and then eventually, when he was convicted of obstruction for not cooperating with investigators, Trump pardoned him. I think Stone even said publicly that he wouldn't squelch on Trump. I think it's pretty hard to fight on all of that. Yeah.
Was he the guy that got arrested and went to jail and then he got pardoned, or?
That's like half the Trump initial campaign people. Yeah, Flynn, Manafort, Stone. Yeah.
Well, I can't really. I mean, I should have looked into Robert Stone more often, but you basically said your prompt was you. What's that looked at?
What?
Go ahead. Just go, Mr. Wise Guy.
You basically you said that it's likely that he colluded with Russia, but I'm going to say the Mueller. I'm going to start with the Mueller report. You said they didn't conclude with
Yeah, I'm good. Destiny versus Soy Pill. Soy Pill's been growing on me. I apologize for. I've been watching Live and Learn. Soy Pill's been growing on me. I apologize, even though I disagree with a lot of the things he said in regards to the joke stuff, but.
Soy Pill. Oh, he can't hear us. Hold on, let me DM him.
Hey, what's up? Can you hear me?
There you are. You got a camera for us today?
Yes, I do. You got to warn me when you just drag me into these things. Come on, man.
Okay. What do you got?
So I mean, I didn't prep for a specific debate. I thought this whole thing was going to be a Destiny allegations trial, but I'm curious. Shit, that's what everyone's talking about. That's what all my DMs are about. But no, I'm curious. Could you read me out your evidence as to why the Russia collusion thing happened? I've been writing some notes. I just want to make sure I got them all because the logic isn't logicking for me.
So Roger Stone 100% was coordinating with Lucifer 2.0 for media timings on the leaks.
Mm-hmm.
Roger Stone was 100% a campaign surrogate for Trump's 2016 election campaign.
Right.
Roger Stone lied and obstructed every part of that investigation into him when investigators were investigating. And then he was pardoned eventually for said thing, for obstructing and keeping any amount of coordination with the Trump campaign safe. I think that it's almost certain that Stone was communicating with the Trump campaign. The Trump campaign probably should have said, "Hey, we don't do that. We're not coordinating with foreign hackers for the American political system. That's not good. That's not okay." But nobody said that. Nobody brought that up. I think it's a similar bad thing for that Trump Tower meeting was basically them saying initially, I think when it leaked, they were like, we were just going to go chat with some friendly Russian lady about some Russian adoption thing. And then it later came out that actually we were getting opposition research from her in a Trump Tower from a Russian attorney. Super not okay. No, not good. And yeah, Trump just tried really hard at every stage to obstruct every part. Firing Comey was the incitement moment for appointing Mueller, telling Sessions to recuse himself, telling Sessions to kill the investigation and then him recusing himself. Other people lying about communicating with Russia, like Flynn getting pardoned. It's just so much Trump pardoning everybody that's helping him keep everything covered up. Yeah.
Okay. So none of that I have a problem with. The incongruency comes from the debate you had right before that, where it seems like a president who is obstructing a justice in the most guilty, obvious ways, and also pardoning or if not commuting Ghislaine Maxwell's sentence is not evidence to, we might never know because the evidence hasn't come out to prove it solidly, but somehow that is like some wild, insane conspiracy, and this somehow meets the burden of, there's probably something there. I believe both of these things are probably true.
So for the the Stone Guccifer Trump connection, that's just publicly known. There's that happened.
Right. So the Trump Epstein connection is known. Obviously, Trump diddling kids is not known.
Yeah,
there are accusers, and that's where it ends. He's partying with him. There's evidence of him trying to cover up his name by saying, "Hey, FBI, redact my name out of these files."
Because the reason why I didn't want to watch the other one is because I don't see any reason why. I get it. There's no hard proof that when it comes to the Epstein stuff, and there's certain elements of it. There's no hard proof. I'm with you there. The only reason why I keep on pushing it is to signify the hypocrisy of MAGA. And I also think there is obviously a very weird relationship between Trump and Epstein. I made a whole video about it. You guys can check out, of course. So I'm curious to see where this goes.
Now, whether or not there's literally a list of people's names, I think that actually is probably not true because it's stupid. I think he probably killed himself, whether or not they coerced him to, or he did it himself because he knew he was fucked. Probably also true. But I don't think this somehow belies the fact that Donald Trump is acting like the most guilty person ever. In the same way that a lot of this Russia stuff is, it seems like there's at least some sort of connection there. If not, why not release the files? Why not, not redact his name out of it?
For the FBI. So here's my question: is there something? So my story. This is my story. Okay, my story is that Trump put a bunch of people in his campaign who who were crazy conspiracy theorists, because that's what MAGA tracks. Yep. Okay, they said a bunch of stupid shit about the Epstein shit. When they came into office, these people are literally retarded. If you look at what Tulsi releases from the DNI, making claims that are contradicted by her own things that she releases.
Yeah, like the Obama evidence, the same stuff.
Yeah, they don't even read our shit. So the fact that they're now, when confronted with the evidence, you're like, oh fuck, we have nothing, and now they're doing their best to scramble and cover it up. And then the fact that
cover up that they have nothing.
Cover up that they have nothing, and that the only stuff they could release would be like flight logs and stuff. But Trump is going to be in those as much as any other person, Bill Clinton or Prince Williams or Andrew, whatever the fuck, or like anybody else. Like all of this, like he's going to be just as like bad as anybody else who's on these flight logs. Is there something in my story that, or is there something in the evidence and the fact pattern that exists? What's like the most difficult to account for thing for me that my story doesn't explain? Because I feel like my story kind of explains it all. Like really
that they would try so hard to redact and block and obstruct and make deals with Ghislaine just because of proximity stuff that we've known for 10 years.
So let's separate these out. So when you say that they would make deals to redact or obstruct, I actually think that's perfectly explained by the fact that Trump knew that at the very least he's in the flight logs. There was that interview.
Right.
I know you've seen it.
No, that's what I'm saying is that everyone knew this for years and years and years. The new stuff would be what's in the files, which is not being released.
There are no files. I don't think there are files to release. I think it's just like investigative stuff that has nothing relevant or important. No, I don't think so.
Well, there's something. What's being redacted? That's that you think that report is just not true, that the FBI is redacting something out of something? Like what files are being redacted?
It was things like flight logs and stuff, things that we've probably already seen. I doubt it. Or maybe maybe interviews with people that mention the name.
I agree with what Soypo was saying. Like, why would it be redacted? I do think there is probably some elements that are not as far as him doing weird stuff with little kids, but there's still like very problematic image issues that they want to keep away from Trump. They're trying to keep away any like potential harmful content away from Trump. So I do think there's stuff in there to insinuate that Trump is a weirdo. And, even though Trump's base has no morals, they can't allow anything to tip it over the edge when it comes to Trump's base.
Already seen, like obviously it's not already seen, otherwise they wouldn't have to redact it. Everything that we know up until this point, like I would say 90% of it has been known since at least 2016. I think where it falls apart for me is you've said like, oh, like if Trump was in these things, it would have fallen apart, it would have come out. A lot of these accusers, if you look at any of their interviewers, they don't even know who Jeffrey Epstein was until he became a public figure and got arrested. So people that like didn't even come out and accuse Trump until he ran for president because either one, they didn't know who he was when he assaulted them at some random party in 2003, or they didn't even know Jeffrey Epstein's last name. They just knew him as, oh, it was Jeff and he did something to me and I forgot about it. And then once these figures become more prominent, that is when stuff like this comes out. So it's weird to me that like, oh, we would have seen it already is like kind of the excusable thing here. Well,
I understand, but this is not as compelling because I didn't know what Epstein looked like until like I think 2022.
No, exactly. No, I didn't even know his name until he went to jail.
Donald Trump, everybody in America knew who Donald Trump was. The Apprentice was wildly popular over here. So I think Trump would have been a little bit harder to not recognize.
Now, the accusers came out before 2016. A lot of them came out during 2016 as well. And then I think what's the one that got the assault charge where it's like civilly liable for rape or whatever. That one was, I think, during the campaign, if I'm not mistaken.
Sure. I guess this is what I can't account for. There's too much that doesn't make sense here. So here are the questions that I would have. Okay. So the first question would be, why didn't Biden release anything, or anybody in his administration release anything? Two would be, why aren't there any leaks whatsoever? I think those would be my two big questions. Why didn't Biden or the Biden DOJ release anything at all about this?
Why didn't Biden release anything out of this? I'm guessing these are like the two biggest things. Is like it could be potentially problematic in terms of image issues regarding prime character number one, Bill Clinton, or just image issues for people that are Democrats or allied with Democratic leader or just American leadership in general. Like the Prince, for example, if there was something to talk about. So that would probably be like reason number one, that there's too many things that is associated with people that you are allied with that can be problematic. Issue number two. My thing is, when it comes to the Biden administration, is that it was never a political focus. I think that's the biggest difference between everything that is happening, is that the MAGA made this a political focus. The Democrats never did. And the only reason why they're making it a focus now is because MAGA made it a focus. So it just again, highlights the hypocrisy of MAGA, that they use this to get them elected, and now they apparently don't care about it. It just highlights the problems there. But I'm curious to see what he says.
And why has nobody in the FBI, nobody's come forward with any additional information at all who's actually seen anything? It's always just like,
I mean, that's a good example, but like, has anyone in the Biden, Obama, or any of these administrations, specifically Democratic administrations, released government documents to try to smear a campaign? I don't know of any examples of this, let alone in the Epstein case. I know like the closest thing I can think of is maybe like the Steele dossier, but like this doesn't seem like a thing that Democratic presidents do. Period. Obviously the conspiracy.
Wait. Well, I'm not talking about just smearing. I'm saying like my understanding is when we talk about the Epstein files, we're saying there's stuff that's like prosecutable in there. No.
Sure, but like I mean, there's prosecutable stuff for Donald Trump, like in the Russia stuff. There's prosecutable, like they tried to prosecute
him for, right?
And it never really went anywhere. And they either said, "Hey, like this is not going anywhere. This is not worth it." Like
there was the huge Jan 6 indictment from Jack Smith, and he got impeached twice. Yeah. So like they do pursue those things, but there was nothing ever pursued or mentioned about Epstein at all.
I don't know. That's what I'm saying is like, I don't know if there's sufficient evidence to show that like, oh, they saw this as a kill shot and didn't release it, which in your story doesn't make any sense. If not, hey, they saw that this was not going to benefit our campaign whatsoever to try to prosecute them on these things that, ostensibly either aren't chargeable or there's not enough evidence there, or the extent to which they even have his name in the files is like what you said, what we already know. Okay, his name's in the flight logs. Oh, he visited the island or whatever. The point I'm trying to say is how can that be the defense of, well, therefore there's nothing implicating whatsoever. If you're saying there's nothing criminal, like, oh, Donald Trump raped a person, here's the picture of him doing it. Yeah, probably not. I doubt that would be like in a file somewhere that like every single person is sitting on when the most powerful person in the world is out there. Like, and they're like, yeah, like, we
agree. I do have to head out, but this was interesting. Shout out Wick. Shout out Destiny. Hopefully he's done with the drama stuff. I haven't even been paying attention to the recent bullshit that he's been in, but that's all I got. Y'all have a good one. Take care. Peace.